welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for our next session, How to Enable the Safe Use of Data and GenAI. And Denise, you just touched upon the responsible use of AI. What excites me about this title today is it's both data and GenAI. I think everybody's coming to the realization that all of these advanced technologies in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and Gen AI are dependent on the data that feeds into them. And if you think about, we kind of like to put a persona to AI as a human being. Well, this is the food that feeds it, right? And we are what we eat. So unless we have good practices around the information that we feed to these technologies and good governance around those technologies, we're not going to realize the benefits that they bring. So we have two very senior executives here. We're going to discuss that today. It's my pleasure to introduce them. I'd like to introduce Jocelyn Houle, the Senior Director of Product Management at Security, and Nancy Morgan, CEO of Ellis Morgan Enterprises. Now, Jocelyn's had a rich career. She's worked at some pretty big name companies, Capital One, Microsoft, Fannie Mae, and now she's at Security. Nancy, a similar exciting career. She was a security executive leader within the U.S. federal government and the former U.S. Government Intelligence Community Chief Data Officer. A mouthful, and I'm sure you had a huge task of work to do, Nancy, there as well. So welcome to both of you. And Jocelyn, you're on mute. If you could unmute.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. And Jocelyn, we'll just get you off mute there. Find that mute button. Still on mute. Okay. Oh, we had you.
Zoom was helping me too much by making you invisible. I got overhelped. It's probably by AI, I'm guessing. Anyway,
we'll get back to it. So with that, I think we've just exemplified the importance of AI and human interaction. So thank you for coming. No. welcome to you both.
Anything I can do.
Nancy, let me start with you, if I may. So Nancy, throughout your many years at the executive level, and recently retired from the federal government, are you a Gen A optimist or a cynic? And if so, why?
So, John, I'm a little bit of both based on my background. I'm excited about the potential productivity gains, automating the burdensome steps, having more personalized assistance and learning pathways tailored to an individual's needs. Those are all good. But as a former intelligence officer, we think critically about everything. And so are the right conditions for success in place right now? I'm a little bit cynical that organizations and individuals are fully ready to leverage the power of generative AI. There's foundational work we need to do. You touched on it, John, a little bit in terms of what we need to do about the data. And I think Jocelyn and I are going to hit that pretty hard today. And it's not just for Gen AI, but for every flavor of AI. We've really got some of that foundational work to do. And many of those key enablers are the same regardless of the flavor of AI. But I'm also not on the extreme dystopian perspective, more that it's going to take time to get there to fully leverage. Thanks.
Do you think industry is ready in their data side of things, or are they still learning?
We're going to talk more about that today, and also in my address tomorrow. We've got a lot to do on the data space. That's not a brand new thought. The CDOs and the CDAOs have been sort of championing that cause. What I think Gen AI has brought to the table is just how much our data isn't ready to do the things we want to do, and I think Jocelyn's going to hit on that as well today.
And I think that's a great segue to Jocelyn. So, given your experience alongside some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies, is this Gen AI topic new? We've been talking AI for a while, and what are the risks associated with this topic?
Yeah, let me just share with you, I spend a lot of time focused on the financial vertical, but all of these large companies, complex organizations, even before Gen AI arrived on the scene in earnest, they were struggling with an explosion of data that was hard to manage, increasingly difficult to view because of duplication, recopying, the cloud complicated this entire effort of understanding and getting a single view into your data across your hybrid or multi-cloud environment. When you have AI joining the scene on top of it, then things really get different. And I'll tell you, some of you may know, but it's interesting just to think about traditional AI and ML really looked at the data you've got and gave you insights on it. Generative AI is creating the data as well. And so that's an incredibly different element of generative AI that needs to be considered when you're thinking about how am I going to manage this. Stealing from one of our customers at Capital One, he said, like, all the coffee drinkers love lattes, right? But once you put the coffee and the milk together, you can't get them back apart very easily. And that's the same thing in generative AI, right? It doesn't forget the information that goes into it. We've got a couple coffee drinkers.
I got a couple.
Out. So, it's bound to create additional issues. And I think, Nancy and I were talking, it's sort of like you were playing chess and now you're playing three-dimensional chess. Similar problems, but at a very different scale. And it's hard to keep it all in top of mind. And so I wanted to share with you what we're observing, just working with the largest customers out there, in that, you guys touched on it on the right-hand side here, enterprise data use, right? How you're going to manage that data, get a view of it, whether it's in cold storage, it's actively being used, it's under like high visibility for governance, or perhaps it's not. So that's a place where we're going to talk a little bit more. Prompt safety, which is also kind of a bad actor. I can go into more detail. Many of you are already familiar with AI model safety concerns, right? Hallucinations, bias, transparency. And we're also going to hear quite a bit more, I'm sure, given the background here of our panelists, of Nancy and our audience. We're going to talk a little bit more about AI and the regulatory environment. Just to quickly touch on a couple of things that you may not be aware of when you're talking about AI model safety. I'm not going to go through this whole slide for you, but as you're thinking about governance, it's not just one thing. Like, as a consumer, I use OpenAI, ChatGPT, and it's a lot of fun. In your organization, it's going to be bundles of models that are changing all the time, completely bespoke models you've built internally, proprietary, open source. And so that's something to think about when you're thinking about how to trace all of these models and make sure they're accurate and as unbiased as possible. Similarly, prompt safety has many different elements that are worth digging into. As I said, I'm not going to run you through all these slides, but I will share them with you because I think, along with the DCAM, it's a really useful checklist as you're kind of laying out what to worry about first. For our customers, everybody has different levels of maturity. I did mention the pillars as being one way, but then the DCAM is another way to start thinking about how am I going to organize my governance approach. The last thing I'll just mention, John, is the regulatory concerns are top of mind, right? In the last few weeks, we've had an executive order on this. We've had a lot of news around it. And so of those four pillars, there's just a ton of thought work going on right now in the regulatory space.
Excellent. Justin, you hit upon a couple of things. It's just a couple of quick questions. It amazes me now that when we talk about AI, we talk about traditional AI as if it's old, right? And which I don't think it is. But I think if you can elaborate a little bit on the point you made, the difference where the traditional AI was data that we were feeding it, but the Gen AI is generating the data. So what does that mean to how we interpret the results and how do we govern it?
Yeah, I love that question. I think as you're kind of unwinding this inside your organization, something to think about is the generative AI that your employees, organization members are using. It's creating new information, blog posts, internal documentation, evaluations of customer service. And so all of that is new data that needs to be managed and thought about in a different way because it has special accuracy problems and only lends itself to certain use cases. The other interesting element of that is it generates more data. The question becomes, who has access to that data? Perhaps I'm just in the customer, I'm a product manager and a product person, and I'm thinking, oh, how can I offer a really great offer to my customers? And I unintentionally am pulling information straight out of HR because my employees are also customers, information I never should have had access to, but it's showing up as the result of new data coming out of Gen AI.
So that's so the best practices around managing data are critical to this, right? Like we said in the beginning, that also goes into that. But